All right, guys, so let's go ahead and chat about some lighting stuff here. And we're going to use the scene as an example just because the scene has a bunch of, like, well, work that's already been done. So at the top here, we're just going to go ahead and look at our lighting only. This is a really useful view here because this kind of gives you a pretty good indication of what your lighting, like, just the main information, basically. Now, for this right now, just because I'm going to be demoing this, I want to talk about how my lights are set up. Right now, they're set to stationary, same with the skylight, and it's passed to a specified HDRI cube, which we talked about in an earlier demo. And that's all done so I can show you guys, like, on the fly what the hell's going on without having to rebuild every 20 minutes, because it'll kill this thing. But basically, when I start dealing with lighting and that kind of stuff, there's a couple things, and it depends on the project, depends on the mood, it depends on the story, it depends on what you're doing. For this, I don't have any game plan here, okay? The goal for this is going to be to have it run in VR, so basically all that stationary stuff's going to get switched to baked lighting. But I want, pretty realistic, convincing kind of set environment. If we kind of shoot up through the roof here, kind of look at everything, this space is open from the top, and that's because my primary light source is a directional light source, okay? Those things aren't lit correctly, but whatever, we don't even see them, so it's irrelevant. And if you guys are curious how I'm toggling off the icons, I'm hitting G on the keyboard. And that's allowing me to this directional light's giving me all of that directional lighting information, which is, so directional light, think of sun, basically. Now, I have a spotlight on here, as you guys saw earlier if you watched another one of these sections, where I attached the spotlight onto my little dude so he could walk around. Let's see if it's still on. It's not on yet. Let me really quickly just open up my little character blueprint here so you can see this little light in action here, just to reiterate it. First person. Spotlight and effect world. Okay, and there's a bunch of different ways that we can use this. We can actually script this via like blueprints to actually turn on and match it, or map it to the keyboard. But again, that's stuff that's outside of necessarily this little tutorial. But in terms of lighting and this kind of stuff, even in an environment that's pretty daylit, there are instances where it would be dark. Like that's just a natural kind of thing that would happen in reality. Now again, the frame rate when I'm not recording is rock solid. It runs around 190 FPS, even with all the directional stuff. But right now it's just dragging ass, and that's because of Camtasia. So sorry about that. But the directional light, or this spotlight's really useful, and you can really do a lot with it. But when you're using this in terms of, like actual performance, it's a dynamic light, so it can be expensive. So just keep that in mind as well. So we're going to turn that off just so it doesn't get too distracting as we're flying around here. Now I know I talked about lighting a bunch of different times in here, but I just want to give you guys like kind of a clear section that just says lighting, so you guys know if you have questions about lighting, what to talk about and what to look for. So lighting, in terms of general expense inside of games, and this is true for Unity, this is true for Unreal, this is true for Source. Dynamic lights are the most expensive, and there's a bunch of reasons why, one of which is how dynamic lights update shadow information. Basically, shadow information is updated on dynamic lights with basically it'll take the mesh and it'll stretch it. It makes a duplicate of the stretch of the mesh, and that's what creates the shadow. That's how the old Doom 3 engine worked. Now some engines do things slightly different, but you're essentially paying for a lot of verts. And so if you want to do an interesting test, take a sphere, tessellate the living shit out of it, and throw a directional light on it and leave it dynamic and see what happens to your frame rate. It gets really expensive. Now if you're running on a higher end card, you might not see it, but still, it's expensive. Then you have your stationary lights when we're talking about Unreal. And stationary lights, think of those as like lights with floating point data. Not that they actually have that, but essentially it allows you to have a light that you can adjust the color and the intensity on with the shadows being baked statically. Now you also have, which we use for VR ridiculously a lot, is we use baked lighting. Okay. Now if I turn this on, let me show you lighting complexity. Because of all that stationary stuff, This whole section here, we are paying for some really expensive lighting, okay? Now, if I rebake that and set that to station or to static, that's going to be all green, which is what you want to be functioning in. Now, again, because of this demo and what I got to show, not doing that. Now, since this is an intro class, I'm not going to go super crazy with stuff. I'm not going to start getting into inverse square fall off and all that kind of crap. But what I will talk about is, you know, kind of more about mood and leading the player and talking about like general lighting. And when I talk about lighting and stuff, I always refer people to look at photos. Photos are a really good indication, and classical painters are as well are really good indicators of lighting. So for lighting in general, if you're a classical painter, you're looking to like kind of look and get a general feel for good mood. Caravaggio is really good. He's my favorite, which is pretty. If you look at a lot of lighting in my work, it's high contrast lighting because that's what I'm into. Now again, with the stationary light here, we can obviously adjust the intensity. Okay, and you can see here we can obviously push this really far up, but. Now, with lighting, remember in Unreal we have a bunch of things. We have lighting, we have our texture information, like in case the asset's being emissive, and we also have post effects that are contributing to lighting. Okay, so you have to kind of be compartmentalized when you work a little bit. And I kind of level everything up at the same kind of rate. Lighting happens as I work. Okay, it's not anything too crazy. If you look through my lighting settings here, there's nothing that's insane. Most of it's all standard. What I want to talk about though is since this is stationary, we have access to what we call right here these number of dynamic shadow cascades. I'm going to up this to like higher. Okay, so the higher that goes, the more resolutions in our shadows. Now, if I wanted to be like, being optimal also means that optimal and kind of visual, like a hit on the visuals, kind of go hand in hand. This is expensive, okay? As these increase, you're going to get more and more. It's rendering more and more of the shadow buffer. It's rendering at a higher resolution. So if I render that at 1, essentially, I don't get any shadows in this case, but the shadows that I do get for the bigger objects are super blurry. You can see them here. If I increase them, I'm just going to go 2, slightly sharper, more shadow resolution, right? 3, more shadow, and 4, a lot of shadow, okay? And it actually gets really finite, which is kind of nice. Now, there are some instances where you want to play with that and some instances where you don't. If you're doing cinematics, you can probably up that a little higher. If you're doing stuff for VR, you got to be really careful with that. You got to keep that in kind of a more moderate range. Light functions. Light functions we talk about and we show. I got a light function happening back here. Let me fly on over to this guy. Let me just go ahead. So this light function is looking up to a material. And this material is set to be a light function. That light function has a bunch of little parameters in here. I have a time scaler, a time sequencer. I have that plugged through some cosine, a sine, and I'm adding stuff back together. I'm adding a cosine and a sine, adding it back into another cosine, and adding that back into another sine wave. And that's expensive, by the way. That can be really expensive if you're not careful with it. So you have to be mindful of that. But for this, I'm going to leave it as is because I like it and I think it looks cool. Just kind of come on down this way. Now, I'm going to just drop this in because I didn't do it in here because there wasn't really an opportunity to do it, but I like using them a lot. I'm going to do some drag and dropping here, so you guys aren't going to see everything. So I'm just going to move this over. I'm just going to type in IES, okay? Did I make an IES folder? So as I'm looking through my, obviously very organized and very structured way of working, IES files are basically lighting profiles, and those lighting profiles are super, super useful and super important because you can get really realistic lighting, especially for you guys who are interested in ArchViz stuff. Really powerful, really useful. Oh, looks like I already have an IES folder in there. Should have probably paid attention to that. IES, where is it? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. IES is good for me. Okay, so and with this IES, you gotta have a sense of humor. It's an important thing. So come under lights here, which is again where you can find all of your lighting information. I'm just going to grab a spotlight. I'm going to drag that into here. Okay, and again, G will allow me to, you know, kind of see everything. Again, basic navigation, WASD, and all that good stuff. I'm going to put this guy right here on the wall. So again, we can just see how that light kind of looks. And again, with the light, we have control over the source radius. Let me just source length. This guy, where is it? Why is it not showing it? Where are you? Should be the source attenuation radius. Okay. So this attenuation radius, this is kind of how far off the light goes from the source. We have an outer cone angle, and we have an inner cone angle. So this inner cone angle, this is the hot spot of the light. Okay. So basic. If you're familiar with any basic 3D, you can kind of see the gradation happening here. If you're familiar with any basic 3D package, basic lighting package, pretty much the exact same in Unreal, with the exception of some of the settings. And again, by default, it's utilizing inverse square, so you get much more realistic result. Come under here, I'm going to type in IES, drag in IES. Now, we notice that the intensity changed, and the actual profile of the IES light changed. The actual lighting, like what the lighting is projecting. So there's a bunch of really awesome things that we can do. Set this back to 0. And let me drag another IES file in here just so if it looks any better. Oh, here we go. This might actually give us a little bit more detail. Here we go. Okay, and we can say, hey, use the IES intensity, because if we open up this IES file, I'm going to open with, I'm doing some work on the side here. This is what the IES file is, and it gives us essentially a bunch of manufacturing data, because for ArchViz stuff, this is really useful. If you're building a house, you want to know what kind of lights got to go in it, so they use this to help explain everything. It also gives you your intensity, and it gives you your RGB values. It gives you like your lighting fall off, gives you your luminance, all that good stuff. Okay, so it's really useful, and it's really great if you really want to like kind of push realism in your scene as well. Okay, and those can be applied to pretty much any light that has an IES input. Skylights. Let's talk about skylights really quick. Skylights. If I go here, window, details. The skylight is really useful. This is kind of like essentially your bounce light, okay, or your skylight inside of Max, right? So you can see here it's going to use that skylight. It's going to blow everything out. It's going to lift the shadows and whatnot. And again, we can pull that down and kill more of the GI. There's also actual GI that we can play around with, and I just want to talk about this because it is important. It's under here. It's under our post-processing volume, window, details. Damn it, I hate when I do that. Come on. Hey, Ender. That guy is a insanely fucking talented environment artist. Holy shit, dude. Guy is super good. Just saying. Let me find my details window here. Okay, sorry about that. I had to do some stuff on the other monitor, so that's why I paused the video. Post-processing. And I'm just going to get into this dark area here. Now, we have a bunch of things, so let's look at auto exposure here. This is my auto exposure for this scene, and this is just based off of a simple like ArchViz kind of setup. And basically, if I want to brighten the dark areas, I can just drag that slider. I'm kind of locking the eye so I don't have too much min and max bounce around, because I don't personally like it. It can be really irritating. That's cool. You can see the particle bleeding through the wall there. Let's go ahead and do the global illumination here. Indirect, sorry, is what they call it. And I'm going to just dial this. So we're at 0 here, or close to 0. And I want you guys to be able to see this. So I'm going to just Control-Z that back, or, not do that at all. 5. I don't remember what it was set at. But that's essentially simulating the bounce lighting. Now, we can also change the color of this if we want to. If we want to control things, maybe, maybe, I don't know, add some warmth into the indirect a little bit. We could do that. Okay. You got to be careful with it, though. Just really pay attention to what you're doing. I don't typically mess too much with the color stuff, but you're more than welcome to. Like, there's absolutely no reason not to if you're going after a look that you're that you want to play around with. What else is being done? Okay, let's talk about this guy. So this is a really good method for doing bounce lighting and kind of soft shadowing. And again, it's super subtle here, so you probably can't really see much of it. But basically, I have a spotlight that's blasting at a card. And let's just, damn it, I closed my detail window again. Sorry, guys. There it is. So you can see it here. Standard settings. I don't think I changed anything too crazy on it. The setting that I changed on this panel here is it's there's obviously no collision. Why is that visible in game? Oh, that should be hidden in game. Yeah, so we don't see it. Wait, do I have that selected? I'm not selecting that. There it is. So that's turned off, so we don't actually see the bloom in when we load into the level. Okay. At least I think I shut that off. I should have if I didn't. But you can have that on if you want. It just depends on the look that you're going for. What else? We have some point lights set up in some areas. Again, I believe these are set to stationary just for the sake of things. Oh no, these are set. Some of them are set static. They're super subtle. It's just I'm using it to bounce up areas that are too dark. Okay. Obviously, we have our reflection probes, and those are all just using the standard settings. What else? That's pretty much everything for the basic lighting setup of this scene. It's not anything too crazy. And that's the thing that I try to talk about with lighting in general, is to try and keep things simple. Like, break it down, go, where am I leading the player? That's point one. Is there an external light source? Okay, there's probably going to be a sun then at that point. If there isn't a sun, then I think that then you start to jump into, where do I put spotlights? Where the lighting source is coming from? And you just try and be really logical about it and break it down. And again, with your lighting, you can convey a ton of mood. Same with your post-processing and all of that, and it's really useful. So hopefully you guys take advantage of that. All right, guys. Hopefully that covers everything with the lighting. And again, there's another section that's dedicated to lighting, but just in case you guys wanted to get information on lighting, I thought this would be a really good way to talk about it. Something else to mention, since we're, games and whatnot, we deal with light maps. So let's come into here. Let me save this video. So I switched scenes here just so I can iterate a little bit, and it also crashed, so that kind of pissed me off royally. So when you bake lighting, and anytime you move anything, you'll notice that when I do that, you'll see up here lighting needs to be rebuilt, and that's because there's static lighting going on. Now, again, this is just one of the Unreal test scenes, and I have one of the assets that we end up, covering in the demo here. But let's look at, really quick, let's look at our world settings here. If I come under here, and I type under light for light map, we have all of our light maps that are being generated, okay? These are super important. If you guys don't already know this, when we build lights or assets in games, you have your UVs. You might have a secondary UV set, and you have a UV set that's dedicated to light maps. By default, when you import, Unreal's going to auto-generate light maps based kind of off your primary UVs. So let's go ahead and look at that. Where are you? Windows details. Okay, let's go ahead and open up this asset here. Super tiny. Oh yeah, I had to end up scaling this guy. This is a temp asset. So this is obviously not used in our scene because it's at the right scale. It's irrelevant right now. The scale is just too damn small. But I wanted to show, let's come under here and look at the UVs. So there's for that. And let's go ahead and again, look at the other UV set. Okay. Now Unreal is a zero-based counter. So it starts from 0 to 1. So 0 is UV set 1. 1 is UV set 2. Does that make any sense? 0 is counted as a UV set. 1 is, well, UV set 2. So it's a little weird. And where I had an overlapping face, it moved it outside. Okay. That's one of the reasons why I kind of unwrap the way that I do. I try to keep things unique. It also makes it easier when I shade, and I want to do like weird shading stuff as well. So lighting settings. Here's all your build lighting settings. You guys can go in and alter things within init files. I'm not going to show that because that's not an intro thing. That's more advanced. But honestly, most of the time you can get away with just kind of using the default settings. I think they work pretty well. So I'm going to build preview really quick and get rid of this error message. Okay, so it built everything. Okay. Now again, you don't really have to do too many crazy things. I'm not going to give you guys a ton of information in these in these settings, because I think they're a little advanced, and I think a lot of times if you're just trying to make art, you're not even going to dive into it anyway. Some scenes that can be really useful for you if you're just trying to show off your asset are this scene right here, the Unreal blueprint or showcase blueprint's really, really nice, and that will essentially turn Unreal into Marmoset. So just do a search on Unreal showcase blueprint if you just want to use this as just a standard kind of Marmoset-like space. Okay, well, I think that pretty much covers most of the generic talks on lighting. I'm not going to talk about too much with the skybox. We talk about it in a few other demos and that kind of thing. You know, for most of my scenes, I don't change a bunch of stuff. I don't dive into the presets and have a bunch of crazy, do a bunch of crazy things. Most of everything is done with, assets, and then I will alter stuff where I need to. So hopefully that helps you guys and get you guys going in a general direction. Again, if you wanted to see any optimization or you needed to see something that isn't standard, you have all of these beauty passes here. We have reflections, we have lit, unlit, we have our detail lighting, of course. Now, if these don't show up correctly for you, you can check and just make sure you hit use defaults to make sure that's the same setting that you would need to make sure it's not altered. Awesome, guys. Well, keep on rocking.